All right, so we've developed a pretty bad oil leak in the bus, and it's always leaked a little bit of oil, but just recently it got really bad where it would coat the car and just kind of make a little bit of a mess. It wasn't a huge mess, but it was enough that it was like, wow. And so we went up with the camera and took some video, and I'll overlay that, and we could kind of see where it was coming from. So we posted it online on the vintage bus group, and most people agreed that that's an oil cooler. So so I called Luke, who's our guy in New Jersey, our bus guy, and got parts, and we have the seals for it, but you know, it's way in the back, all the way at the top. And we did, when we were first investigating, we went in the rear bedroom, pulled out the access panel, tried to go that way, and just all it is exhaust manifold. There's a giant exhaust manifold right in the way. And so we've heard the exhaust manifold can be kind of a nightmare to take off. And so we're gonna attempt to go up through the bottom. That's gonna be how we first attempt it, but we may end up going through the top. So when we spoke to Luke, he said it's maybe easier to go through the top, but then we talked to like 3 other guys that said no, definitely go through the bottom. We're gonna try the bottom first. If that doesn't work, then we will go through the top. All right, the part we're looking at is right there. So I'm gonna try to remove that. There's this weird access panel back here, but it's sort of just cut into the wall. I'm gonna try to sit up in here. I don't know how successful I'm gonna be with that, but I'm gonna give it a try. All right, actually I'm quite comfortable in here. So I'm in the engine bay, and we are gonna have to take off a bunch of wires. And so the first thing I'm actually just gonna do is investigate up here and see what we're working with. And I'm probably gonna disconnect all of the electric. So I'm probably gonna go and disconnect both the 12 volt, because there's a lot of these cables here. Let me turn the camera around. All right, as you can see, there's a lot of these 12 volt cables here, and 12 volts isn't much, but they can put out a lot of power. So I actually think I'm gonna be able to get this off, and that's what I'm hoping. There is some kind of hose clamp up there and a couple of wires. So there's a wire also right here. So I'm gonna try my best to kind of clean all this stuff off. But first thing I'm gonna do actually is go ahead and turn off all of the power. So I forgot to do that, and now that I've climbed in here, of course, I need to do that. So I'll climb back out, and hopefully I can get to this. This doesn't look too bad, but you can see there. So there's a bolt there, and then the cable goes up and around, and I think it literally connects to the engine right here. So I think it's just a grounding cable. So that's what I'm gonna try to get off next. All right, so I've removed this cable from the firewall up here. I've loosened it from that, so it's, see the loop there, and then it's also connected to the back of the starter right here, and then it goes into the block. All right, removing those wires really got things cleared. So you can see a little bit of coolant leaking here. This capsule is going to be full of coolant. That's what the oil cooler is. So we can also, way up there, we can see a clamp, and I think that's for a hose that clamps this thing onto the cooling system. And there's another one over here. So I think the first order of business is to try to maybe get those clear. I don't know, I think it's gonna be messy, because there's also a petcock down here. You can see that, where you're supposed to be able to drain the water. That's stripped out and broken. So so I have a feeling that this is still full of water. So anyway, but we can see how much clearer access we have to this thing here. All right, so on this side, to get those bolts out, I ended up having to take the fan out, and then I was able to come through here and get those bolts. It was pretty tricky. So I had to swing the radiator out and take the radiator fan out. So anyway, so that's free now. It's loose on the top. So we should be ready to go and start unbolting the actual water jacket from the oil cooler. So that's what I'm gonna do now. All right, here we are up under here. We can see that that has separated now. We've loosened the clamp way up there pretty well. So I'll go ahead and give it a couple more turns too. Now we're gonna take out all of these bolts. And I think there's 10. So anyway, that's what's coming up next. All right, back up under here, we've pulled all the bolts off. I'm gonna try to go up here and see if I can see any other bolts, because this is not coming off. This cover is not bulging, it's not budging. So I don't know what's going on. It just doesn't want to come out. So I tried to kind of tap on it with a mallet, and it doesn't seem to be working. There does seem to be a small lip there. So I would think that that would be where it separates. It's just not wanting to separate. I've also loosened that clamp way up there. See if I can see it. So I've loosened that clamp quite a bit. It's, you know, it's super, super loose. So anyway, trying to figure this out. All right, day 2. So yesterday we pulled out all the bolts. We disconnected the water. We did have to take the fan out of the front, which made it a ton easier to get back in there from the side. And we removed a bunch of the cable that was kind of in the way. There's a big negative ground cable that goes to the starter. We've removed all that stuff, and so we're ready to pop that cover off, but it will not budge. So I was in there with a big pry bar and tried to kind of pry it up at the lip where there's the water thing. It would not budge at all. I kind of tapped it with a mallet as well, and so I called Scott and said, hey, this won't budge. So Scott, the bus grease monkey, and so now he suggested getting a very thin putty knife and just extremely gently tapping on the just on the corner between the layers, just to try to get it unglued. So I guess what happens is after a while, with all the heat and everything, they kind of glue together. So that's what I'm going to try this morning. We've got a tiny hammer and this little chisel, which is really stiff. So hopefully it'll get us in there. So that's what we're going to try. All right, here I am under the bus. Bear with me with this light. So these are the two halves that come together. You can see I've removed all the screws, and over here is the flange that I was talking about that I was kind of trying to use a pry bar with, to no avail. So anyway, all of the screws are off this. There are 10 in total, 3 across the bottom, 3 across the top, 2 over here, 2 on the other side. Then there's 2 bolts that I removed for that, and then I loosened, if we look at the very top here, let me see if I can get it to focus on that. There's a clamp up there where I loosened that. So we may have problems running into that exhaust pipe. I'm hoping we don't. Scott says we need about 3 inches of clearance to pull this out, because obviously the actual cooler part of the oil cooler with the finned things is under this cover. So we'll see how it goes. So I'm going to just start to tap this. I don't have a good way to record this, so I'm probably not going to record it. But what I'm going to try to do is run this guy right at that top gasket right there. So just tapping just little by little. So just very lightly. So I don't want to mar any of these surfaces. So anyway, that's the plan for today. All right, so about 3 minutes with this little guy. I did just keep tapping just real lightly, and I'm trying, like I said, not to damage any of the surfaces, But I worked on this for about an hour yesterday, trying to knock it in various regions and trying to pry it from the flange. And today in 3 minutes, I got it with this little pry bar. So anyway, that's worked out nicely. So that, I would say that I would recommend doing that, because it was pretty hard to pull apart. So I'm gonna go ahead and try to get this off, and we'll go from there. All right, so now I have got this cleanly separated from the other one, but this clamp up top, I think, still needs to be loosened more. I did loosen it quite a bit, but I think it's still holding on. So those bolts are off, so that's free and clear, but it does move. But I think I just need more. I think I just need more up there to be able to get it. And there is a chance that it won't clear because of this exhaust pipe. And so if that's the case, then I may have to just remove the exhaust pipe anyway. So we'll see. We're gonna play that by ear. Anyway, that's the progress on this guy. All right, we successfully removed the cover. It does not look like they had a, it doesn't look like they used a gasket. It looks like maybe they just used RBT, which is bad. Anyway, that is the thing up there. That's the part I was having so much trouble with. I ended up taking off that clamp altogether and then just working it back and forth until I finally got it. I did lose the bolt. It's under here with a socket that I've lost earlier. So once I remove this plate, hopefully that stuff will all come out. So anyway, this is the cooler. So it looks like there's 2 bolts in the center here. So I can remove the cooler there, and there'll probably be a little bit of oil in there. So anyway, I'm gonna work on removing those and see how far we get. All right, so I've unbolted this center 2 bolts. So there's one there, and I think this whole thing comes off as a plate. So you can see the line there, and I think I'm just gonna have to gently tap it again. All right, it took a little bit with the scraper, but I gently went around the whole thing, and that cooler is quite heavy. So if you're doing this, just kind of be prepared that it's pretty heavy. So anyway, now I've got to remove this, and I've kind of started peeling away at the gaskets, but you can see down in there, there's a bolt. In there, there's a bolt, and I think there's a couple more bolts on the other side. All right, here we are. So I've torn the gasket off where I can. So there appears to be 4 bolts. So 1, 2, and then over here 3, and then 4. Oh shoot, maybe there's 5. Yes, maybe there's 5. Let's change that. So there appears to be, oh no, maybe there's, shoot, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm gonna go with 6 now that I can see it. So anyway, we're gonna get those out and then pull this whole plate, and we're gonna clean everything up. Try to clean up some of this too. We'll stuff some rags in the holes so we don't get things in there, and I'll stuff a rag in that as well as that, just so we don't get stuff in there. And then we'll just clean it up a little bit, because this is an oily mess from that's been leaking for some time. So I'm glad to be doing this, and hopefully our car will thank us when there's not a bunch of oil all over it every time we stop. All right, so took those bolts out. All of those, and it still won't come out. All right, it just needed a little bit of prying, and it came right up. I've stuffed rags in here, but this is what it looks like back here. I'm gonna clean it up quite a bit and then stuff some stuff back in here to prevent anything from getting in these holes, because that's for the fresh oil for the engine. So I'm gonna try my best not to get stuff in there. In fact, I think I'm gonna put the screws back in too, just so that we don't get stuff in those holes too. But this is, I'm pretty sure the leak was coming from these, because these were literally like not even hand tight. They just were not tight at all. And I screwed them back in to make sure that it wasn't because this was stripped, just to check that. And that is not stripped. They were just not tight at all. And these are sealed with a washer, and it was a copper gasket on the bolts, and it was not even hand tight. It was just loose. I could just turn it by hand. So anyway, that's very likely where all the leaking was coming from. All right, so this is what this looks like before. We're gonna clean this up, degrease it, and you can see the gasket stuff is on there pretty good. So we're gonna clean that up and get all the surfaces perfectly smooth and clean. Alright, trying to clean these gaskets off. It is a real pain. So this is solvent. I think it's paint thinner. Paint thinner doesn't work super well on these gaskets. So we did try this lemon, and it actually worked really well. But that's a pretty expensive bottle of lemon to be wasting on this. So I'm using a razor blade and just real carefully keeping it, you know, pretty even and flat, just trying to take it all up. So it's a slow process. Alright, so this morning we've painted these parts. They are iron or steel. I thought they were aluminum, but I'm pretty sure they're steel. So we taped over all the portholes, and we're just painting it so A, we can tell if it's leaking, where it's leaking, and B, so it doesn't rust. So anyway, put a fresh coat of paint on there. We used a Fusion paint, and getting ready to do this one. Alright, here's the part ready to go in, freshly painted, and all of the surfaces have been prepped. So we took a razor blade and cleaned off all of the gasket material on all of the surfaces. So they should be pretty much ready to go in. So we're adding a little bit of Right Stuff, and this is to glue the gasket kind of in place, to hold it in place while we kind of maneuver it up there, and to seal any imperfections. Like you see in the metal here, there's some kind of stamp. If there's any imperfections that would make it leak, this stuff will kind of seal all that in.
Okay, you think that's good?
Yep.
Okay, good.
Good. Yep. Okay. All right, I've prepped these surfaces. So you can see I razor bladed them. They did have a little bit of gunk on them, a little bit of gasket material, but I've razor bladed them and got them as clean as I can, and we're gonna try to put the part on. All right, we successfully got this part mounted. What I had to do was, at first we tried to put the little gaskets onto the piece itself and then put the screws through and get the whole thing in. That didn't work well. So what I ended up doing was gluing them down with the Right Stuff, just a tiny smear of it, down to the block, and then putting the bolts all through this, and then sort of using the bolts to line it up before I push the plate down. And that seemed to work okay. So we've got all the bolts in, and so with the Right Stuff we have to wait 1 hour before we go ahead and tighten them all down. So they're just hand tight right now. We'll wait an hour, we'll come back and torque them all down, And then once they're torqued down, then we can start putting the gasket on the oil cooler part. And you know, I got to clean up this surface of this guy, so I'm going to clean him up with a razor blade. I'm going to put a towel over this and clean that up, just to be sure that we get a good seal on that and not have any leaks. So the water comes in through here and then goes up there. So anyway, that's the plan. All right, so we've got this gasket put on now. I've aligned all the holes with the little bolt, and so we're getting ready to put the actual cooler back in. All right, this thing is super heavy and awkward to get in here. So what I ended up doing is putting these like that, just to hold it in place, and then I'll get the gasket, I'll get the bolts in. So try that. All right, I actually forgot that I needed to put this gasket on. So I put the gasket on, tightened the bolts down. It did bulge the gasket a little bit, so I'm a little bit nervous about that. But those are tight. Those two bolts are tight now. And it's really hard to reach in here. So good times, I've got that scraped out, ready to go. Same with that one up there. So we're getting close. All right, one of the things that I thought was kind of weird is this is the seal to the top. So this is the old one. And see, to me it looks kind of concave and like it has a groove. And then this is the ring that seals it, so it goes around that, just like that. And it seems to fit perfectly. Now this is the new one that was sent for the replacement, and it's just not even close. I don't even know what to think of that. So, gosh, the problem is I won't even know if this has worked or not until I completely get it all assembled and all the water put back in and then turned back on, and it starts leaking. So I don't know. This part's got me a little confused. So like I said, this one looks like it has, like you can see there's dimension to it. There's like, and I don't know if that's just because it's been smashed in there for so long, but this one actually almost fits inside the other one's ring. So I just don't know. And there's the difference on the thicknesses. Now I don't know if that's just from being smashed in this thing, and then this, you know, this clamp kind of held it the way it was supposed to be. I don't know, but I guess I'll try this one, and hopefully it'll work. Alright, we've now stuck the new gasket on here for the water, and it seems to fit well. Alright, for these bolts here, we actually got new ones because the old ones were so gummed up that it was just, they did not go in well. In fact, when Michelle took them into the hardware store, they went in like 2 turns and then it was just grindy. So the guy asked if they were metric. So we said no, we're pretty positive that they are standard. So she got new ones, and they go nice and smooth all the way down. So it's really hard to reach where this goes, so I'm hoping that makes it just, you know, quite a bit easier. All right guys, we're very close. So this is where we are. We've got this installed. We've let it set for over an hour now. I'm going to torque those down all the way, and then figure out how to get the jacket back in here and get everything gasketed up, and hopefully that will do it. So crossing my fingers, and we're gonna go for it. All right, I wrestled this thing in. It is a very tight fit with all this stuff in the way, but it does go in. Now I gotta see if I put that seal, that rubber ring in the back, in correctly. And it looks like maybe it is. I've got this very, very loose. So I'm gonna try my best to loosen it up let the ring kind of sit and make a seat, and then put in a couple of these bolts and then see if I can get it that way. So it's pretty tough getting it in there. This guy looks like the water line in the back looks like it's lined up pretty well. So hopefully that won't give us too many problems. So I put 2 bolts on in the back, and I had to push up quite a bit. So I've got this pry bar that I kind of pried up on that side. So hopefully that closed the gap in here. So I'm gonna take a look, and I'm gonna have Michelle check it out for me and make sure that it is down where it's supposed to be. So there's that. I'm gonna try to fly it around up and over and see if I can see the other side. I may not be able to see anything, and it's gonna be upside down. All right, back in here, we've got a few more bolts in. They've all gone in very nicely. I gotta check this guy, see if we're clamped over the rear of him. I'm gonna have Michelle look over this too and let me know, but I think that's a lot closer. So, anyway. All right, while we're down here, this is the starter, and I would love to pull and rebuild it and all that good stuff, but we want to get back out on the road. So the starter's working just fine. We've never had an issue with it, but it does look a little wet on this bolt. So I stuck a socket on it. That is a 15/16. I had to use a universal to get any kind of torque on it, but I was able to turn it about half a turn. So I'm thinking that was probably leaking as well. I'm gonna knock the crud off that one up there and do that one too, and the one in the back. So just, you know, just to get them and make sure they're nice and snug and tight. So it's a good idea while we're back here. Here's this guy looking good back here. We're about to put wires on it, so I've got to, before I put those wires all in the way, I'm going to connect the water back there. Water up there is hooked up. The clamp way in the back, let me see if I can focus it. That was a fight. So if you do one of these, that is going to be a struggle probably. It was tough to get it in. All right, we're using this cheap liquid transfer pump from Harbor Freight just to transfer the fluid in. So we've got 3 buckets worth, and it's going pretty good. Well, worst case scenario, here it is. That rubber part that I suspected may not be fitting or may not work correctly did not actually work correctly. So now I'm gonna have to remove that thing again. Hopefully it won't ruin the seal, and I guess put in the old one because that new one just doesn't fit, or doesn't fit correctly. So more work. All right, electrical's all been removed. So let me see if I can get a better look at this guy. Definitely get a better look, but I still can't see much of anything. But I do think it's leaking because under here is soaked, which that can only happen if that top one is leaking like crazy. So I'm very confident that that thing did not hold at all. In fact, you can see more water dripping down there. All right, I've pulled the clamp back so we can investigate what that looks like. Looks like it's going all the way around. I think it's just too small. All right, I've pulled it apart. Gosh, we'll see what happens. I'm gonna try to get that seal up in there. Needs to seal both those sides. Just the old one, there was just no way. I had my suspicions because the seal didn't look anything like the old one. So anyway, Michelle's cleaning up that seal, and we're gonna try to use that. We'll see how it goes. All right, got the old piece on there. We're gonna try to see if we can see if it's seated all around and stuff. So just go up and around and try to get as good as look as I can. All right, take 2. Couldn't see much that last time, so I'm gonna try to come here. I'm just trying to see if when I push it in, let's see if I can zoom, will it go up and over the lip? And I think it's positioned like it's going to. So I just need to push so we can see there's some separation here. So when I clamp that down, that should bring all of this down and it should put it in the right position. So I'm gonna try that. All right, so we've got this clamp down, not super tight, but about finger tight. Check out to see if we got a good seal all around that gasket. So I'm gonna zoom in a little here as well. Just slowly go around and see if it's all the way. It looks like it's good. Looks like it's all the way around and up over the top. Oh, looks like there's some weirdness there that I may have to fix. All right, we had to take it back apart because Luke called and wanted the dimensions on it, so I had to get some numbers off of it. But let's see if we've seated it better. He thinks he has a part number for me that'll work, but I may just try this one and then we'll have that one if this springs a leak or when it springs a leak. So let me check it now. I'm gonna go real slow around here. Let's see if I can move that. See if we can get a better view up underneath. Let's go over. We'll have that same weird lip thing that we had last time. All right, this clamp fought us tooth and nail. So, let's see. It was really hard to get back in here, but it looks like that's right. I just want to make sure that I'm covering the whole gasket. All right, I've tightened it up. So we're gonna have another look just to make sure that we're over the lip. So I'm gonna go up and around and try to keep this in focus. Michelle thought she saw something back here, so I'm gonna look back here a bit. Sorry for the shaky camera, it's a very tight space and it keeps trying to focus on the near stuff. All right, well, it isn't pouring out, but if we can see here, it's just actively dripping. And it looks, you know, I'm gonna probably blame this clamp. Let me see if I can see anything coming out of the clamp. All right, I tried to clean a little bit more with the rag. Oh yeah, that looks like it's coming from back there. Okay. Yeah, it looks like it's coming from way back behind there. Okay. All right, so I adjusted this clamp and just trying to see, there's a little bit of water still running, but I think that's from where I adjusted the clamp. So I adjusted this clamp again just to try to get it a little tighter, and I think I may have stopped the leak just with tightening down the clamp. So it's not dripping like it was. A lot came out, not a lot, but you know, when I loosened the clamp, it started dripping like a whole bunch. So I'm gonna keep an eye on it, but that may have fixed the leak. We'll see. All right, I tightened and adjusted the clamp up top and no more leaking. So that may have been it. It may have just been that the clamp was not adjusted correctly and not grabbing the rubber gasket well enough, but it seems to have stopped all the leaking. So there is a little bit of residual. I tried to clean it up. There's a little bit of residual coolant, but I don't see anything actively leaking like it was. It was dripping off their pretty good rate. So everything's all hooked up. We've got power to the starter. We've got our positive over here. We've got two negatives on the on the case here, and it's all been painted and all new seals. So minus that top seal, which was the wrong one. So that's the old seal. I wish we had a new one, but we don't. But the old one seems to be holding. All right, as an update, that fix has held great. So we took a trip. This last one was up the West Coast, up through Oregon, down through Idaho, into Utah, putting about 4,000 miles on the bus, and it has held great. So Luke did send us the new part. This is the new one here. And as you can see, it is significantly bigger than the original seal that I got with it. And it does have that bevel to it, so I do believe this is the right seal, but I obviously haven't put it in. That seal has held great. So that last trip that we took, though, the 4,000 miles, I did develop another oil leak, which we fixed at Scott Cook's, and I developed a coolant leak. So we'll go into those later. I'll show you how I fixed them, but for this particular project, we're gonna call that done.